So welcome everyone, and thanks so much for making the time to join us. So today we're going to cover the top 3 strategies that we see working right now. And really this is based on the learning from your successes, like the success of our community, the Property Filter members who have done 2,200 deals last year on Property Filter. And basically this is kind of a report to you to show you what works right now, so you make the most of the new year. So we're going to cover very briefly why is it that all strategies don't work, and it might be that you've been very successful doing one thing for many years, and the market has changed in so many ways that it's going to be a lot more difficult right now. So we're going to go into this, and straight into the spoilers. I'm going to go straight spilling the beans on these. So I'm going to share with you the top 3 strategies working right now. So different ways of doing supported living, assisted sales, and short leases, and then Hanif will detail, step by step, all of these works and actually how you can make the most of these right now. And the problem when we talk about new strategies and at the start of the year, we might be distracted and might want to jump from one strategy to another. It's not something we'd recommend you to do. So we really want you to be laser focused and have a framework to really make sure you're working on a strategy that works right now, and make sure you're working on a strategy that is actually right for you. So very, very briefly in 20 seconds. So I'm Guillaume Black. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Property Filter. And as you know, we are on a mission to help serious investors who are all Property Filter members, by the way, find all the hidden deals anywhere in their area, so that you never miss out on a deal again. So all strategy don't work. The biggest problem we see people struggle with is picking and focusing on a strategy. And the truth is, every strategy as it stays, they work for a while before they are harder to make work. We've all seen these cycles before. And what you want to do is really, you want to know what is going to work and what are the best strategies that you want to focus on right now. And that's exactly what we're going to share with you today. So that's really the idea. So you really need, how do you know, like what works right now? You need a direct pulse with the market, and you need to be close to the ones who are successfully operating in it. So as you know, the Property Filter community has grown massively over the last few years, and using the software, the software, our members have had more than 2,200 offers accepted last year alone. So us being quite close to you guys, we really know what works right now. And the purpose really of today is, and the events we organize is for you, for the community, so that you can also make the most of this, And as a company, we invest everything back into the product and the community, like we just did, some days ago by releasing the Property Filter community app. So I trust you are all on it, as members. You would have received invitation emails and things like that. The idea here is that this is a private social media platform for Property Filter members only, where you can access all the live calls that we run. So for example, this masterclass and the 5-6 calls we run each and every week. You've got hundreds of hours of resource recordings covering every strategy, every skill you need as an investor or a business owner. That's really the idea here. We've got plenty of short courses as well to help you find your next deal, whatever your strategy, and a member directory, so you can go and connect with other Property Filter members, other people either because they have the deals, or other people because they might be the investors. So make sure you check your email. So over the last few days, you would have received an invitation from me. So the Property Filter email, the email you use for your Property Filter account, do check your spam. I might send another one at the end of this, so to make sure all of you guys are in, And once you are on the community, the cool thing is you can download the mobile app, like the Property Filter community app, and from there you can take the community, the resources, and the support everywhere you go. Okay, so we're all investors in this room, so we all want to make money. We all want to be successful in property. We all want more results, for the amount of efforts we put in. So why continuing to work on things that don't work? The market is changing, and you can't afford to be trying to do deals with strategies that just don't work anymore. You can't afford to be swimming against the tide. You can't. You need to focus on what works right now, and you need to adapt to the best strategies that are working right now. And that's the idea with today. So there have been massive changes, affecting all of us and our ability to do deals over the last few months, and where most people will give up, if not running for the hills. Today I really want to explain and share with you how you can truly turn these problems into opportunities. So we've heard about the renters reform bill, the stamp duties that have increased a few months ago and are going to increase again in just a few months, and all the opportunities around the Leasehold Reform Act. The idea here is, when you are informed and you've got the right strategies, how can you turn all of these into opportunities? Because we want to be, in every change, there are opportunities, and we want to be those people who are making the most of these, and not following the herd, and moving to crypto when it's too late and things like that. And because others will stick to what doesn't work or just give up, it means there is a true window of opportunity for us, and we're going to share with you exactly how you can make the most of this window of opportunity, or you can make 2025 a year for the book. So if we take one of these one by one, generally speaking, it's a common theme for those of you who've been around for many years. You know that as property investors, when you are savvy, successful at what you do, the constant is that you always have to adapt and pivot to the best strategy that works right now in the current market. So with the renters reform bill, the problem we have, so just so you know where this is, so it's at bill stage, it's in the House of Lords, and by the summer we expect that this become act and law. So from that point, what it means is, as a landlord, you can no longer evict tenants. So with no fault eviction of Section 21, so you have to go back on Section 8, which is more of a lengthy process. There will be no more ASTs. They will all move into periodic tenancies, which means that you could have a tenant for 6 weeks, and then they give you notice. So that's a lot of cost in terms of relettings, and a lot of headaches, and all the risks to do with rent areas and things like that. So the way you go around this is with supported living, and Hanif is going to share with you exactly how you can do that and different ways you can do that, and it's going to be awesome. Another thing that another spanner in the work, as it were, that came our way and is going to be exacerbated in a few months. So at the last budget in October, the Chancellor announced the surcharge on rental properties and second homes to go from 3 to 5%. And this is in where the scale of stamp duty is still starts at £250,000 and above in England, and this is going to reduce in March, end of March this year, to 125,000 as a threshold. So it means a further increase there. So this means is, as investors, really the purchase case are going up so much, it squeezes our margins in a way where it becomes prohibitive to do any form of flips. So any one of you in the room, today, doing flips, interested in flips, you will feel the pain of this, because it eats all your margins. And so the cost makes it prohibitive to do these strategies, and it's really difficult to, really going to slow down the way most people are going to grow their portfolio and things like that. But when you've got a strategy that gives you capital events and ways of bringing cash into the business, you can go around this. Even if your main strategy is not flipping, the strategy we're going to talk about today is really going to help you grow at the same, if not at a faster pace that you've been so far. So when flipping becomes impossible, and when bringing capital into the business becomes harder because of this, assisted sales is something that works really well. So Hanif is going to show you exactly how he's been doing these, and I think the first one he's done would have been like 21 years ago or something like that. So whoop, I've got a little pop-up that came in. And then the last bit we're going to share with you is things to do with the Leasehold Act. So this is now law. So this is since the middle of last year. And the problem with leasehold properties has always been that you had to hold the property for 2 years before you could extend the lease or buy the freehold. There was always a lack of transparency with service charges, arbitrary ground rents, and huge premiums, when it comes to extending the lease, when the marriage value would kick in on lease lengths below 80 years. All of this has changed, and Hanif is going to share with you exactly how he did his last deal, a no money down lease extension, just a few weeks ago. So And look, the market conditions are the same for everyone. The wind blows on all of us. The wind of disaster, the wind of opportunity, and the wind of change. And it's not about the wind blowing, but it's very much about our ability of setting the sail in the right way, so you can go toward the direction we want in our life, in our businesses, for our portfolios, and in our ability to do more deals. So, and all that matters for us, if you remember Property Filter's vision and mission, is really about empowering you to do more deals. So like Emad, actually, was speaking with Emad just over Christmas, is that it's 46 deals. So he's done 46 deals in 20 months on Property Filter. Or Phil over here, I think he's done 41 HMOs, in the last couple of years, which is good going. And a lot of our members, so if you're on the community app, you'll see quite a few of you guys have been kind enough to come and share exactly how you do your deals. So all of these are resources you can access, and have a look, so there's plenty. So, and these are just some of the 2,200 offers accepted we've seen on Property Filter in 2024. And, we spent more than £2.5 million on building the software, the highest rated platform for property investing. And in last year alone, we won, 3 times PropTech Company of the Year, as a result, a recognition of the effort and the impact we have on this industry. And all of this, again, is to empower our members to find more deals. That's really the idea. We've been running events for property community leaders. So if you're property networking hosts, you might have been lucky to come to these. And last October, for the first time, we tested running members-only events for the Property Filter members that sold out in days, and that you guys rated as a world class, if you were lucky enough to secure a seat, because they sold pretty quickly. So this year we're investing a lot in the community, like I've shown you with the community app. But the next big thing for us is going to be with the next edition of the Property Filter Intensive on the 24th and 25th of January. So the idea, we timed this event at the beginning of the year so you can make the most, take the advantage of the opportunity and make the most of 2025. Again, this is our big event of the year, designed for Property Filter members, and it's really about giving you a step change for the year, the momentum for the whole year. And the way we run events with Hanif is we give you step-by-step implementation of the strategies that are working right now, and so that in a depth that you won't see anywhere else. Okay, so just going back on why are we here today? So because all strategies don't work, we want to focus on what actually works right now. So in just a moment, I'm going to pass the mic to Hanif, and he's going to walk us through the 3 strategies that we see working right now in this current market: different ways of doing supported living, assisted sales, short leases. And then if we have time, we'll go through a little framework we have for our inner circle members. And it's all about giving you absolute clarity on what strategy to use and which one is the best for you. So let me introduce you, Hanif. So Hanif is my mentor. He's been, he's done well over 500 deals, probably quite a few more than that in his time. He really understands the first strategy we're going to talk about, because when it comes to supported living, he owns his own care company that he set up 14 years ago, even, way before it was sexy and a buzzword. This company is doing 7 million a year. They've got 140 team members. And if there is something to know about this strategy, it really is Hanif. When it comes to creative strategy, he is the absolute greatest of all time. I don't say this slightly. He did his first assisted sale more than 20 years ago. And we understand, the hardest thing with assisted sales is getting the vendors, or the agent to agree. He owns a state agency, so he really understands what makes them tick, and how would you, or can you position your offer so that the assisted sale is the favorable option. He bought his first short-lease property again some 20 years ago, and they say in property you're just as good as your last deal. Where just 3 weeks ago, I think 12th of December, you completed on one of these, no money down lease extension. So we're going to go through examples of that as well. So he, back in the days, he was the most sought after property trainers. So he taught thousands of investors, and he got bored of teaching, some 15 years ago. And before he retired, he created what is considered as the Bible for property investing. With his associates, he wrote 1,000 pages set of manuals that really detailed all the blueprints to the more than 50 creative strategies, including buy to lease, lease to lease, assisted sales. Oh, I'm going to mute someone. Here we go. Assisted sales. What did I say? All things to do with lease options, title splits, etc., etc. You know, and all the property courses you would have seen taught over the last 15 years in one way or another are spin-offs of these manuals. You know, so having shared his knowledge, he went on to do something new and new things to focus on launching and scaling fast-growing businesses. You know, like distribution of innovative products into B&Q, distribution of beauty brands into Boots, Harrods, Selfridges, and scaling apps and tech companies. So one of his apps in the beauty industry has grown to 30 million in revenue in the last 2 years. And for all of these reasons, this is why Hanif is my mentor. So without further ado, please join me in giving Hanif a massive Property Filter virtual welcome. Hanif, over to you. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us. So what I'm really going to do today is I'm going to try and focus on and explain to you 3 different strategies that we're doing. So supported living, assisted sales, and short leases. There's lots and lots of strategies out there. These are the 3 of my favorite at the moment. And also looking at what members have been doing in Property Filter, it's what seems to be working the best for people. I'm going to go in quite in depth into these strategies just to allow you to sort of understand why you'd use them, why that I think they're the 3 top strategies for the next year. And I'll just go into more depth, and then at the end we'll have a chance to ask questions, and ask me any questions as detailed as you like, and we'll go through and I'll explain how we're doing these strategies ourselves and how members of Property Filter have also been doing them. Okay, so let's go into the first one, which is supported living. So just before we go into this slide, let me just explain what supported living is. So supported living really is, this is when you have a property and instead of giving it to a tenant, you give it to a care company who then give it to a tenant. And that's really what it's all about. And the reasons you do that, if you flip to the next slide, Kim, is because, and this is why I love it, is because it's a hands-off investment. There's no maintenance issues. You put all of that onto the care company and it's their responsibility to look after it. You're not worried about a tenant, ringing you at 3 o'clock in the morning and saying the toilet's blocked. It's irrelevant. And what, again, also, Guillaume talked about the Renters Reform Bill or Renters' Rights Act. And basically, you don't have to worry about that because you're giving it to a care company and it allows you to not have to worry about those issues. And that's really why all of our current portfolio, as soon as tenants move out, we're pushing it over onto care company contracts, and anything new we buy, again, we're looking to put care companies into them on all our different portfolios that we have. And if you do it right, you can get more rent, which is, everybody wants more rent. And the biggest problem I've seen is where people give their properties to a care company who's really new, doesn't know what they're doing, they mess up the house, and it's that risk that you need to understand. But honestly, if you do it properly, it's a great strategy. And like I've been saying, we set up our care company 14 years ago, and now we have over, I think it's about 140 people working for us. And I'll explain a little bit more about that as we go through this. Okay, and lastly, everybody I know and who I taught sort of 15 years ago. So I stopped teaching really sort of 15 years ago, 12 years ago probably. But all those people who I taught back in the day, who built big portfolios, and when I speak to them, they're all pivoting to this strategy. So they're all moving from, renting their properties to tenants to renting them to care companies and councils and so on in the supported living sector. So I'll explain a little bit about how all that works. Okay, so let me get into what happens. So if you're doing a buy to lease strategy within supported living. What you do is you buy a property, or you may already own it, but you buy a property, you then lease that to a care provider of some sort. Could be a council, could be a care company, could be a housing association. They pay you rent, and they then find a tenant who rents the property. Okay. And what happens here is you never have a direct contact with the tenant. Your direct contact is with the care provider, and that's how you get paid, and that's the only relationship you have. And normally you create a 3-year, 5-year contract with them where they are responsible for everything, all the internal maintenance of the property. Usually you're responsible for the outer walls, the roof, and that's it. So that's usually the contracts we sign with most of the care providers we give our properties to. So it's a great way of doing rent to rent, and absolutely, it's my favorite strategy. It's where we're moving all our portfolio are going into that. The other way you can get into this with supported living is lease to lease, and lease to lease is really rent to rent done right. So, I mean, back in the day, 15 years ago, when I wrote all these manuals, rent to rent was great, and you could do it because the numbers worked. So I could rent a property and give it out on a serviced accommodation or something, and make a margin between, paying £500 to the landlord, getting £1,000 from the serviced accommodation. So I made a £500 profit, and that was great, and it worked. But now those margins have collapsed, and rent to rent doesn't really work unless you do it like this. So if you're doing lease to lease, what you do is there's you lease a property from a landlord, and then you flip to the next bit. Yeah, you lease that then to a care provider who then finds a tenant. So in essence, again, you're making that margin in the middle between the two. What you pay the landlord and what the provider gives you, and that's your profit. And it's a very good, it's way better than normal rent to rent. And the reason it's way better is because it's a hands-free. The lease agreement you do with the care provider is they're fully responsible for everything. The lease agree, so you don't have that maintenance issue and management issue. So whenever I'm doing any businesses and doing anything around property, I want to be able to scale the business that I'm in. And you can't scale a business if you're constantly working in it and you're constantly having to fix problems. Tenant's got a leaking toilet, shower's not working. Either you have to have a team running all of that, or you have to do it yourself. And you can't scale stuff, and you can't really have passive income if that's what you're doing. So what I always look for ways of creating either teams to run stuff or passive income solutions, and this is the best solution that is out there for lease to lease. So it's a great replacement for rent to rent. Okay, so how do you do it? So like I said before, the number one biggest problem and why people mess up in this strategy is because they choose the wrong provider. They find someone or the council who are not very good at running their business, and therefore they mess up the property. They don't pay your rent on time, etc. So what you're really looking for is to identify the best providers, identify those that have been around. So me, I always tell people what I do. So what I'm always looking to do is find people who are at least 3 years and been operating for 3 years before I give them our properties. They should really have 20 employees or more. So I know that they're kind of an established company, and they should have at least a good rating from the Quality Care Commission or the Care Quality Commission. And I do choose other companies that are not quality care companies, but again, they should all be at least running and operating for 3 years. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to understand what their need is. So are they looking for a property to house, battered women, for young children, for alcoholics? etc., etc. And you'll get different amounts of money depending on the type of people that are going to be staying in your property. So be very clear and make sure you understand who they're going to be putting in there. So, for example, the highest amount of rent that you're going to get and what they'll pay for most is pyromaniacs, people who burn houses down, right? So you do not want those generally in your house. They might be paying you £2,000 rent, but they'll burn your house down. Saying that, we've looked at it where you have sprinkler systems and so on, but we're not going to go into that right now. But what I'm trying to explain to you is understand who is going to be who are they going to house in your property, and put that into the contract so they can't suddenly house somebody else other than the kind of person that they've said that they're going to be housing. And once you've done all that, it's well worth it, because you then get a 3-year, 5-year contract, and you pretty much get paid rent without any worries, and you can just forget about that house almost. Okay, so what I'll tell you what I do and how I currently run this business. So, like Guillaume said earlier, I have a care company that I own, and we have used it to build up a buy-to-lease business. So, for example, within this care company portfolio that we have an opco, which is the Hanif at the top, or a holding company, and that holding company owns 2 companies. One is a property company, and the other one is the operating company. And the operating company, is the one where we have 140 people working for us. We sort of have a revenue of around 7 million a year, and we use the rents that we pay for the property company then buys the properties that we rent. And I think it's the portfolio is just shy of I think 34 properties probably in there now, 33 or 34, depending on what's gone through. And the idea within this business is to own all of those properties out cash for this particular portfolio. I'm not saying that's right for everyone, but for us, because the cash generation is so great, we just want to own those properties out for cash. So we currently lend with Lloyd's. So they give us sort of 50% of the purchase price, and we put in the cash for the other 50%. You don't need to do that, however, and there are other properties that I give to other care companies, not our own care company. And in those cases, they're on normal mortgages, 85%, 80% mortgages in a normal way, or they could even be on bridging, depending on the deal that we've structured, or options. Okay, so what I'm really explaining to you is the beauty of this is it allows you to scale, and that's why we've done it. It allows you to scale your property business and your property portfolio in a very hands-off, passive way. And that's, the ultimate that people should be trying to get to. What you don't want to do is create yourself a job. Okay, go ahead, Guillaume. Right. So what we want to do is, how do we find this property on Property Filter? So there's lots of different ways to find it, and you just use the filters, and you basically use the filters based on what criteria the companies that are looking for want. So, for example, if they're looking for 3-bedroom houses, then you run the criteria, and what you're looking for is the properties that are undervalued using Property Filter. So undervalued in some way. So that basically, the way I look at it is, I look at for properties that are below the that seem less cheaper than the other properties using Property filters. And it's very easy to say, for example, the square foot price is less than so I don't know if you can point to that. Yeah. So so first of all, you can put in bedrooms. Go ahead, Guillaume. If you just click through, I'll just talk through. So, for example, you can put in the number of bedrooms. So if they're looking for 3-bedroom houses or 4-bedroom houses, only put that in your filter. So it will show you all the 4-bedroom houses. And then it tells you the ones that have come back on the market. The other red circle at the top there tells you the one that have been reduced and come back on the market. And that really gives you an idea of the cheapest, or the properties that are going to be the easiest to negotiate the prices on and lower. So actually, this is one thing I do want to tell people. What I've noticed is people look at the price and they go, oh, look, they've reduced the price and it's, 350,000 for this property. Just because that's what the property is on the market for does not mean what you need to offer. You should offer a lot lower, especially if they've already reduced the price and their property has fallen through a couple of times. I would offer another 20% below that reduced price, and you would be surprised how many times people accept it, because they just want to, they've had enough. They just want to get rid of their properties. Okay, if you click to the next, Gib. Right, negotiating the deal. So we haven't really got time to go through all of this, but in essence, what I use is the bullseye negotiation wheel, which I've spoken about on other occasions. And really, the idea about this is, be prepared, understand, build a rapport, understand what they want, because what you're trying to do is create this win-win solution for you and for them. And ultimately, the idea is, if you can create that win-win solution, what you end up with is a very simple way of negotiating. And I don't know about you guys, but when I first started, I absolutely hated to negotiate. I still do. Uh, Inside, I'm an introvert, and I find it very difficult to. So I'm not an extrovert at all. I'm an introvert. And when I first started, I found it impossible to negotiate. So I created like a 5-step negotiation system, which is number 7 on here. And it sort of takes you through how to negotiate without having to negotiate. So it makes it really super simple for everyone. If you carry on flicking through the slide, Kim. And then once you've done that negotiation strategy, I use the perfect offer system. And again, this is something that we've perfected. And what we've done is we've created templates that we use. So when we make an offer, we don't just say, I'm offering you, 327,000 for this property. We justify that offer in a systematic way. So we say, we're offering you 327,000 because it's 15 grand for the central heating, 10 grand to change the windows, 8,000 for this, 2,000 for fixing the roof, etc., etc., etc. So they can see it all broken down. And this is my profit margin that I need to make it work. And that's why I'm offering you 327,000. So what happens is people are very emotional and they need logic to justify those emotional decisions. And using this strategy, lots of people have, including Tammy, I showed this strategy to Tammy, and Tammy had 2 offers that were turned down on 2 properties that she was offering. She then made lower offers using our perfect offer system and got them accepted, just because everything was justifiable and that number was justifiable in the vendor's mind. So the seller then becomes, oh yeah, I can see why that offer is real and makes sense because of all these things. Okay, fine. And that's really what you're trying to do. And ultimately, right, what we're trying to do is secure these deals at the right price. And the most important thing is, what rent you're going to get from the care provider up front. So now, if you know what you can pay for the property to be able to do this deal and make sure the deal stacks up. And this is again what I love. I know I'm going to get £1,200 a month for the next 5 years with this contract in place. So I know exactly what I need to pay, what my mortgage is going to be, and where there's going to be enough margin for me to make it work. And that's really what I'm looking for. And look, I don't know if any of you guys negotiate or do deals and source deals for yourself. The deals are in the follow-up. The more you follow up, and if you don't have a system to follow up, you will not get the deals that you expect to get. I've had deals come back to me 3 months, 6 months, 9 months later, even a year later, especially commercial ones, just because we keep following up and we have automated email sequences, etc., and letters and so on going out and if you don't do that, you will not get the number of deals that you would otherwise get. Okay, so how do you structure these deals? And the main thing to think about is structuring the contract with the care provider, and it's about the length of the contract. So how much rent you're going to get, any rent-free period that you've agreed. So, for example, on the last one I did one in Alum Rock about 3 months ago, and I gave the company 2 months rent-free. But in return, they fixed up the property. That property would have cost me probably £7,000 to fix up and get it ready to be rented out. They're only paying me £1,200 a month, but by giving them 2 months rent free, they've done all the work that they needed to do, and they did it. They gave me a schedule of works, which was all the things that they were going to do, and that was part of the agreement that my letting agent would go in and check the work before they got the contract finally signed off. So it's really important to understand all of that, who's responsible for what in the maintenance, and any issues that will happen during the 3 years. So I pretty much push everything onto them, and they usually want to take on everything. And the reason they want to is because they've got a tenant in the property who could be vulnerable, could be somebody with lots of care needs. And if there's a shower that's not working, they want it fixed same day. They don't want to be relying on a landlord to call somebody to do this to then get it fixed. So therefore they usually take on that anyway, because they know they're going to have to do it themselves. So it's a great way of pushing all the maintenance issues onto them, and make sure you always put that into any contracts that you have. And then make sure everything is legal, you've got proper contracts in place, make sure you've got your insurance done, etc. You'll need a different insurance or an extension to your existing insurance policies that you have if you've got current buy-to-lets or any new ones. And yes, we've covered insurance. And of course, some mortgage companies won't allow you to lend with care companies, but there's lots that you can swap the mortgages onto if you've got existing properties. And if you're buying new, there's plenty of companies out there that give you mortgages that you can give to care companies. Okay, if we move on. So good question. And why now? Why am I so excited about doing lease to lease and buy to lease when I've had a care company for the last 14 years? Why do I think it's about to blow up now? Well, it's because of the Renters' Rights Bill. What you've found is a huge amount of landlords who bought in the early 2000s are just like, I want to get out of this now. I don't want the headache. I'm 20 years older, 25 years older than when I started. And actually, I'm coming to retirement age. I bought these properties as a pension, and I was going to give them to the kids. The kids are, doing their own thing. I might as well. I don't want the hassle. I'm going to sell them, and I'm going to buy myself a Ferrari or whatever. And the number of landlords that we get contacting us constantly saying, I want to sell my property, I want to sell my portfolio of properties that I bought in the early 2000s is massive, and it's gone up at least eightfold in the last few months. Not too sure what's happened to your thing there. Okay, it's fine. So because of that, there is a lot of exiting landlords, and I think what we're going to get with the Renters' Rights Bill is we've got a window of probably 18 months where all those people who want to leave will leave. And that's why, it's fill your boots now over the next 18 months and really get as many of those landlords who want to exit. And the thing about those landlords who are exiting, they bought that property for 50 grand and it's now worth 250,000. So, whether they sell it for 200 or 250,000, they're not that bothered. They only paid 30, 40, 50 grand for these properties. So they are, like some of the properties I bought in Birmingham 25 years ago when I first started, I bought them for 33 grand. Those same properties are worth 220, 250 now. If I sell them for 200, am I that bothered? No. If I was exiting, I'm still making 150,000 for each one I sell. And this is why they're leaving and giving margins to people who are buying, because they're still making a lot of money. And then lastly, there's a huge high demand within the social supporting living sector right now for these properties. There's a lot of people that are being moved out of hospitals, out of care homes, into these kind of smaller care homes, and the demand is massive in most areas for them. So, you know, all of these things have come together to make this strategy really one of the strategies that you really want to be focusing on if you can over the next year or so. Okay, if we move on. So we've talked about supported living. I'm now going to explain to you about assisted sales. Now, I love assisted sales mainly because so the first assisted sale I did was probably, let me think, probably 2001, 2002, something like that. And it was really an accident. What happened was I was speaking to a vendor, and I chatted to this vendor, and the deal didn't really stack. I couldn't make enough of a margin. And I said, look, let me help you to fix your property, get it on the market and sell it. And he was like, yeah, that'd be great. You know, I've been trying to sell it for the last year, it hasn't sold. So then I ended up doing an assisted sale without really understanding, because there was no such thing as an assisted sale at the time, without really doing it, just because I was trying to solve their problem and fix it for them. And then I was like, oh, this is really easy. And actually, this is really good because it saves me all the legals. It saves me all this hassle in terms of, you know, having to buy it and then resell it. I just can do the deal in one go. So I then, you know, formalized it and put it as one of my strategies into this manual that I created, which had all these different 50 strategies. And the reason I think now is a great time again to be going into assisted sales is because of stamp duty. You know, this extra stamp duty is just making it crazy for people to be able to do flipping. So when I talk to people that I've trained who, you know, who flip 100+ deals a year, all of them are saying they are struggling to be able to flip the deal and make it work other than doing it as an assisted sale of some description. So some kind of assisted sale structure is the only way you can do it right now, because the margins are just not there. By the time you pay your stamp duty, pay your legals, pay your holding costs, your bridging costs, etc., you're into 15 to 20%. So that means you need to get the property 30-40% below market value. Not many vendors are willing to sell at that price, and assisted sales allow you to do that. And again, you know, so for me, what I love about it, it allows you to get lumps of money really quickly and grow your pot. You can sell the property without it by doing this joint venture with the owner, with the current owner, and it requires little or low cash into the deals. So, you know, sometimes you could, we've done assisted sales where we've spent like £1,000 just fixing up the front garden, making it look nice, clearing out all the rubbish, and just raising the curb appeal of the property. That's really what you're trying to do. Raise the curb appeal, raise the reason for doing it. You can do much more complicated assisted sales where you're putting in a new kitchen, adding an extension and creating more value. And they work too. And they, you know, they're great. You can make 50, 100 grand on those kind of deals, or you can do smaller deals and make 20K where you're only putting a couple of grand. But for me, I like them. I'm very risk averse. It reduces my risk. My only risk is the money I've put into that deal, you know, the £1,000, the £2,000 I put in. That's the most risk I have. And they allow me to be really flexible in how I structure the deal, so I can create the win for the owner, the vendor, as well as for me. So let's go into a little bit more about how assisted sales work. Go ahead, Kim. So in it, basically, you and the seller agree a deal to sell their house. But what you're doing here is you're not trying to sell the house to an investor or to someone quickly. You're trying to get the maximum price for this property, and you're going to try and sell it to a normal buyer. So it could be a first-time buyer, somebody moving house, whatever, but someone who wants to pay the normal price, and you're going to try and maximize that price. And that's the whole thinking behind what you're trying to do here. And the way you structure the deal is either using an option, so a lease option of some sort, or an option agreement in reality is what you're doing. So a lease option without the lease part of it, or you do an exchange with delayed completion or some kind of joint venture agreement. And the legals are usually structured with a combination of at least two of those things in place, and sometimes three. If you do exchange with delayed completion or option agreements, I always make sure that my agreements are flexible, so that, for example, I will have option agreements that are assignable, so that I can assign the option agreement if I want to somebody else. And the same with my exchange with delayed completion. I will exchange contracts, but I have assignable contracts. If you click on to the next part of it, so what happens in reality is the buyer then will buy the property. You get your share. So let's say you agreed anything above 150,000 that the property sells for was yours. So that would be a fixed fee above 150,000, and the 150,000 goes to the seller, and you might make 40k, 20k, 100k, depending on what you put into the deal and how you've set it up. So the main ways that you do it is you either go a percentage of the uplift. So it might be 50% of anything above 130,000 is split equally, or it might be I'm going to get paid 40 grand for doing what I've done, so a fixed fee of some sort, or it might be anything above a price. And we used all three of them. And personally, what I tend to use is either anything above a fixed price, so anything above 140,000 is mine, or I use a percentage of the uplift price. So anything above 140,000, we split that 50-50 or 75-25 or whatever number I come up with. And most sellers are very happy doing those kind of deals, because what happens is a seller has a price in their mind. They want 130,000 for their property. And if I say, look, I'm going to get you your 130,000 and anything above that is mine, is that okay? They usually are very happy with that. And they are more than happy with that deal. And what I often say is, I say, look, because I want to always sweeten the deal. You always want to give somebody more than they want in a deal. So you always, try to make them feel. So even if they've accepted the deal and they say, yeah, 140 is great, I'll say, look, anything above 140 I'll give you another 10%. And that incentivizes them to try and get the most for that property. So they'll keep the property clean. They make sure they're really nice to the new buyers as they're walking around, to looking at the properties, or the potential new buyers. And it works really, really well. And honestly, always give a little bit more than the other person was expecting, because it gives you more deals. Plus they bring you other people, their friends, and they say, oh yeah, speak to Hanif, he done this deal with us and it worked really well. Okay, if you flip to the next part of it, and sorry, go back one step, sorry. So the other thing that you've got to understand is the reason that you can make money in an assisted sale is not only because you fix up the property, but you can add value in the way you sell the property. I haven't really got enough time to go into that. But for example, when you're selling the property, if you put new carpets, do a refurb, pay their stamp duty, pay the buyer's legal fees, it makes it easier for a buyer to buy your property compared to other people's properties that are on the market. So they're much more willing to pay a higher price for your property. I'll explain that later if we got time in the Q&A, but we use that a lot, and it really makes a massive difference. Okay, finding deals on Property Filter. So again, assisted sales are great, and the best way to find assisted sales are properties that have been on the market for a long time. And anything that's been on the market for 9 months, a year is ideal. Anything over 6 months, to be honest, you can start talking to them potentially about doing assisted sales. So I'm looking for properties that look a bit run down, the pictures aren't great. Within that, if you want to click through, Guillaume, I'll speak through. what we've got here. Okay, so click the next slide again. Okay, so negotiating the deal. Carry on. Again, I use the same bullseye negotiation wheel, which I've covered elsewhere. And again, the idea is to create this win-win, to make it super easy for them to understand. And we again use that 5-step. So number 7, which is the 5-step negotiation system. And then I make the perfect offer system again. And again, what I'm trying to say here is, look, if you want, so one thing I do differently with assisted sales is I frame the pricing and why I want to do an assisted sale for them. I say, look, if you want me to buy your property for cash, I can buy your property for cash, but it's going to be 130,000 for cash. I would not accept that offer if I was you. I really wouldn't accept that. Now, how many people turn around and say, I can offer you 130,000, but don't accept that offer? When you say that to a vendor, they're like, what do you mean? And I say, look, that's the most I can pay, and any investor who's going to want to pay. But what I can do is this assisted sale thing with you, where I can help you to get more than that for your property. And if you could do that, we can get you 150,000 for your property, and I'll make my profit on what I can sell it above that. And then they're like, okay, explain that a little bit more. So that works really well. And I always add that into my perfect offer system for assisted sales. So make sure you keep that as a reminder. Now, the thing is, you also want to educate agents. So here, what I tend to do is, I've owned a few estate agents over the years, and we've sold some. We still own one. And the idea is, make sure you've got to understand what the agent cares most about anything is commission. And what they're worried about from you is that they're not going to get paid, and that they're not going to get paid for a long time. So what I tend to say to the agents is, you're going to get paid on this. This is a property that you were not going to be able to sell anyway. It's been sitting on your books for 6 months, 9 months. You don't think you're going to sell it. I'm going to help you to sell it. And what I've done is, I'm going to pay you on it. So if I've done an exchange with delayed completion, I'm going to pay you on exchange. Now, usually that obviously might mean I've got to pay 2,000 across to the agent, but I don't mind doing that, paying them early, because I know that they are going to be super keen to do this deal with me. And sometimes I might pay them half, sometimes I may pay them all, but that makes them want to really do the deal. You don't have to, and quite often you don't. And the great thing about this is, once you've done this once with an agent, that agent will then bring you so many other properties, and they will start talking to the vendors and saying, look, your property's been on the market for a year, hasn't sold. Go speak to Hanif. He's able to get, he'll structure the deal and get you a sale. It's the only way we think we're going to be able to sell it for you. And they pre-warm up the vendor for you once you've been working with an agent and you've done your first flip with them. Okay, carry on, Gib. And then, like I said, educate your vendors with this cash offer versus the assisted sale offer. So the cash offer is low, but you very clearly say, I would not take that offer if I was you, because you don't want them to get upset. Now, if they turn around and accept that offer, then it works anyway, right? That offer is so low that it suddenly means you can flip it out to a investor, and there's a 30-35% margin in there, that it makes it worthwhile as a flip. Generally, they never accept that. They always want the assisted sale, and that's the fair thing, ethical thing to do. We're not here to try and scam people into selling their houses below market value. What we're trying to do is help them to get the most for their property, whilst we can also make money too. And if you understand creative strategies and understand how to make them work, you can always give people more than they wanted in a deal. And that's what I always try and do. Okay, carry on. And just like we said before, the deals in the follow-up, the number of times they've said no, and then, another deal's fallen through, they come back and they say, yeah, absolutely. Can we do this thing that you talked about now, please? And then you can renegotiate the price if you want to, or make it work at that point. And again, I briefly talked about how you structure the deals. Assignable contracts are the way to go. and make sure, depending on what kind of assisted sale I'm doing, it's either an assignable exchange with delayed completion or a lease option with either just the option or a lease and an option agreement. I very rarely do joint venture agreements. I do them occasionally, but it really depends on the structure. But don't worry too much about that, because that's what the lawyers put together, and they they know how to do that, and they'll do it in the most efficient way depending on what you're trying to get out of the deal.
Hanif, there's always a bit of confusion around the EDC and the stamp duty being due on exchange, and doesn't that make you liable for the stamp duty and things like that? Always people have questions around that, and I can see there's some chatter about it in the chat. Do you mind explaining why?
Yeah, of course. So the way you don't have to be liable for if you're going to do an exchange with delayed completion and you don't want to be liable for stamp duty, which clearly we don't in this circumstance, what you have to do is, first of all, I always make my contracts assignable. But secondly, what we also do is we also make them subject to certain conditions. So it might be an exchange with delayed completion, and I've exchanged contracts subject to me finding a new buyer, because that's what we're doing, right? We're finding them a buyer. So because it's subject to, that is not a definitive contract in law. I have not agreed to buy their property 100% unless I can find another person to buy it from me. So therefore, that exchange with delayed completion doesn't happen, and from a stamp duty perspective. And that's really the way we structure it. Again, speak to your lawyers, but they'll structure it correctly, so you don't have to worry about stamp duty. But that basically fixes that problem. Okay, so don't worry and think, oh, I've done an exchange with delayed completion, I have to pay stamp duty. You don't. You have to make subject to contracts. Now, normally when you're doing this with lawyers, the vendor's solicitor will not want to do subject to, but if you explain what you're doing and you've got the vendor on board, they'll then get the vendor to sign something to say, you understand you've done this exchange, and it doesn't really mean that much because they've got this subject to contract. And so long as they sign that, then the seller's solicitor is usually happy to do that kind of an exchange. Okay, carry on. Structuring the deal. Okay, again, I always incentivize the agent. If they're selling my property, I want to pay them more. So if they've asked me 1.5%, I say to them, I'm going to pay you 2% or 2.5% if you sell it within 14 days or within 28 days, whatever the number I want, and if you sell it at this price. So they then, what do? Because they're going to get a bigger commission, they're on the phone ringing every single person they can think of to try and sell that property to. Whereas normally agents are just reactive. They put the board outside and they wait for something to happen. If you incentivize them to sell it quicker at a price that works, they'll actively ring out, and that's really what you want. I always change the advert, change the copy, change the pictures. So I take it off the market, then put it back on the market. And the reason for that is everyone gets a notification to say this new property's come on. People don't realize because they see a different picture and they think it's a new property that's come onto the market. And that's what you want them to do, so that new buyers will come in and buy your property. And we also do our own marketing quite often, depending on the area. Quite often, in some areas, the people who are going to buy your property are the people on the next 4 streets. So we will leaflet drop the whole street to say this new property is coming on the market. It's it's done up and it's on a great price and it's on with this agent or whatever, and that helps push it along and make a sale quicker. And if we're doing, sometimes we don't use agents and we use our own sales, and we'll do it ourselves and we'll organize an open day so that there's lots of people in that property at the same time. We've done our leaflet drops and we've got 10, 20 people all viewing the property on the same day, and that incentivizes people to make offers quicker, because it seems like everybody wants to buy that property because there's so many people looking at it. The most important thing though within assisted sales is, a third of all deals fall through. And the reason they fall through is because the progression is not done properly. And what I mean by that is you're not chasing up the buyers properly at the beginning. And the most important thing is to keep chasing them, keep checking. And if it's not going to work, if they haven't got a deposit, move on to the next guy straight away. Check that they have a deposit before you accept their offer. So we always get proof of funds in place, and we double check that proof of funds, make sure it's not some photocopied Photoshop proof of funds, etc. And have they contacted their lawyer? Has the lawyer received money? Have they contacted the mortgage broker? Yes, we can see they're progressing. We can see a surveyor's coming out. We know this deal is going to happen, at least from the buyer's perspective. And if they're not, we move on to the next buyer very quickly, and we make it very clear to them it's because they're too slow. And what that does is you know within a week if the buyer is going to go anywhere, rather than 2-3 months later, which is what normally happens in a lot of these deals that fall through. Okay, if we carry on, Guillaume. Again, why now? Absolutely, it's because of the stamp duty. The stamp duty has meant that a lot of deals where people would flip sort of 15 to 20% BMV don't work. Because if you try and flip a deal 15 to 20% BMV, by the time you add in your bridging or your mortgaging costs and your stamp duty cost, there's no profit margin left in there. But if you went to a vendor and said, I want to do an assisted sale with you at 15% BMV, it works because they're only offering you 15%. They're not even going 20%. And there's no cost to you other than the cost of, the works. And so suddenly those deals become super alive and super thing. So personally, I think this is going to be the number one strategy that people use instead of BRR or anything else in the next year. And we are building our systems and our team in our back end to be able to do this on a big scale, for the deals that we don't want to buy or there's not enough margins in, and we'll, rather than buying and flipping them, we're just going to do assisted sales. And again, the great thing here is you get 20 grand, 10 grand, 40 grand lump sums of money that you can then reinvest into property, or if you really want to, go buy a Ferrari. People often say to me, oh, the reason I want to get into property is because I want this car, or I want this. But when they really think about what they want, it's very rarely the Ferrari that people want. What they want is, freedom. They want to be able to not have that job. They want to be able to spend time with their children. And those are the things that really matter to people. So just, I know lots of people have certain things and they have vision boards and they often have a red Ferrari on there, but just be careful as to what it is that you really want and really think about what you want. And often it's not the red Ferrari, it's the time with your family. It's the, it's that time and being able to have that freedom of time. That's what people really care about ultimately. Okay, if we move on. Okay, so let me talk about short lease strategies now and why they work. So a short lease is really any property that has, so especially with flats, but also with houses that have only got less than, say, 60 years left on the lease. Because what happens is if you have a property with less than 60 years left on the lease, you automatically cannot get a mortgage unless you extend the lease. So there's very few companies or mortgage companies that will give a loan on a property that has less than 60 years on a mortgage, and pretty much none of them at 55. I'm going to show you one that we completed on. I'll talk about that one that Guillaume mentioned that we completed on, I think it was the 12th of December. So just a few weeks ago. And I'll explain exactly how I did that deal and how I structured it so that it was a no money down deal. And we just agreed on another one today, actually, or the team have. I'm actually in Cape Verde, so I'm not in the snow. But the team have just agreed another deal today, similar, more expensive property, but a similar type of deal and a similar type of structure. But I'll talk you through the one that we just completed on the 12th. So first of all, why short leases? Possible low purchase price. Again, you're getting a deal where it makes sense for you and for the vendor. You're giving them what they want. You've got fewer competitors. A lot of people don't understand, don't want to know, get confused by the whole process, and then therefore there's a lot less competition in this space. You can, by doing the extension on the lease, you make money on the deal, and we call that arbitrage, but I'll explain that a little bit more when we go through it. And you get higher rental yields because you bought the properties cheaper. You add value to the property simply by a paper exercise. So simply by extending the lease without any refurb, without doing anything else, you've added and increased the value of the property. And that's what I love, because it's a paper exercise. I'm not doing any work. I'm not refurbing. I'm not painting. I'm not decorating. I'm not adding bedrooms or anything else. All I've done is got my lawyers to do some clever stuff around extending the lease at the same time as my purchase. And the great thing is the Leasehold Reform Act has meant that you don't any longer have to own the property for 2 years. But even if you do, the way we structure the deals, you can get the vendor to do and give you the right to buy anyway and the right to extend anyway. And you can definitely set up deals with no money down. I'm not saying they always work no money down. They don't, but they always work, and they give you a great profit margin, which I love. So at the moment, we're trying to do one of these every other week. So let me, if you go on to the next slide, let me explain exactly how it works. So basically, you've got a vendor. He's got a short lease, so that orange bar there. And then there's a freeholder who owns the freehold of that block of flats. And the leaseholder owns the lease, maybe 50 years left on the lease, and there's you. So what happens is, click the next step, is you come in and you agree to buy the property from the vendor on either an option, or the structure behind it is either with an option or an exchange with delayed completion. You can do either, but you're buying it below market value. So the flat with the lease of, let's say, 40 years is worth 100,000, and that's all it's worth. That's the market value because there's only 40 years left and only cash buyers can buy. But what you do is you agree that price, and then you do some clever paperwork. If you carry on, where you extend the lease with the freeholder, so that orange turned into green, and I got a longer lease. And because I've done that clever paperwork, I've paid the freeholder a share or some money for that extension. But because of that, I've increased the value of the property by a lot. It'll become clearer when I go through an example a little bit later on. But that's the idea. What happens? I've extended the lease. I've increased the value of the property by, say, 50 grand, and I've only paid 15 grand for that extension. That's the essence of what I'm doing. Okay. So this is the flat that we just completed on in 12th of December was the actual completion date. So they had, so the open market value of this flat is 120K. It's a 1-bedroom flat in Birmingham. The lease length of the flat was 38 years remaining. We bought that property for £34,000 and on a 100% bridge. And the bridge is costing us 1% a month, which is 340, and we can rent it out at 725. And the lease extension to extend it would be 30K. So all in, this property would have cost me 65 grand if I was to buy it and extend it. So buy it for 34 and extend it for 30, which would make me a huge profit. However, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to bridge this property. I'm going to not extend the lease currently. And then in 6 months' time, I'll remortgage and extend at that point. And what that means is the open market value is 120,000. I can get a value in 6 months, a mortgage valuation, because you have to wait 6 months after you buy a property if you haven't done any work on it in order to get the open market value. So that will allow me to remortgage at 120,000. The mortgage amount I'll get at that point is 96,000. There'll be some costs, and the extension will cost me 30K. And overall, I'll have 26,000 cash out of that property, plus 24,000 worth of equity in that property as well. And it will cash flow me sort of £300 to £400 a month. Great deal, fully no money down, did it 3 weeks ago. It's what happened. It's perfectly possible. It's not something that doesn't happen. There are actually so in the inner circle that we run with the guys for Property Filter. That I taught people 9 different ways to structure these these short lease contracts, and how you can structure them in different ways depending on the deal, so that you can maximize your profit but also give the vendor the maximum that they want or can get. And we went through 9 different ways that they can structure those kind of deals. And honestly, it's such a simple, easy strategy. There's very little competition in there at the moment. It's really easy to find these deals using Property Filter, and it's a no-brainer. So like I said, we just agreed another one today. We've got another one that's in the offing on that. So the one that we've agreed today, I'm happy with. It's a 2-bedroom flat in Birmingham again, and we're getting it 40-50k of profit in the deal. And there's another one also that we've got. The thing that you have to be careful with them is if there's any cladding issues on the block or any other kind of major structural problems. So in this particular, the third one that we're still negotiating on, they've got some cladding issues. We're getting the property at more or less 50% of value. But I just need to fully understand what those cladding issues and when they're going to get resolved. It might be 2 years down the line, which I've got no problem with. If it is 2 years, I'll hold the property over 2 years. But you just need to fully understand what you're getting involved in. But as a strategy, there are so many deals that are super easy, just like this one that I've talked about. And they're available all over the country. And people do this a lot in London, where they find other deal strategies don't work. This strategy works really well. And like I said, you don't have to pay the 30k for the extension. You can structure the whole deal so it all happens at the same time when you buy the property. Your mortgage comes in, the mortgage pays the extension and the current owner, and you end up with the property without having to put the money in. It works brilliantly, and it's one of my favorite strategies right now. You want to carry on, Gim? Yep. So just one of the things here I wanted to mention is one of the reasons why we didn't extend the lease at this moment, because it was 30k to extend it, is because I think that the government is going to introduce in the next few months a new formula for calculating the value of a lease. And if they do, it's going to be roughly half that 30,000. So it'll only be 15,000. So I'd rather wait and see if they do. And if they do, then I'll make another 15,000 on that deal. And that's why I've structured it in the way that I have, rather than extending when I bought. Okay, go ahead. Okay, so how do you find these deals? Well, believe it or not, it's really simple. There is actually a filter that you can use, and that shows you. So for example, here you can, Game, do you just want to talk through? It's not very clear on my screen.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah. So you could filter to say, is the property a leasehold with a registered lease? Yes, we've identified it. Show me all the properties where basically the lease length is below 80 years, and you see all of them. So this is some lead generator looking at Southwest, SW postcodes in London, and there's 100 properties right now available. This is as of yesterday, and all of these will have this lease length problem where they'll struggle to sell to a normal buyer. The things will fall through and things like that. So a quarter of them, as you can see, have already had their sale fallen through, and 62 of them, and it's great because it makes the percentage calculation easy. So 62% have also been reduced, since they were first listed, which is a lot more than what you expect on normal property. So all of them are, well worth having a conversation.
Yeah, And this is exactly what I'm saying. It's so easy to find them on Property Filter, first of all, and secondly, there's so many of them. Because the people don't understand this strategy. They don't, although it's been around a long time. The first deals I did around this strategy is like 20 years ago. People don't get it. They don't understand how to structure it in a way that you can do it with a mortgage and you don't actually have to buy the property for cash. So 100% this strategy is going to take off as people understand it and get to see it and can see that with Property Filter it's so easy to find these deals. Okay, let's move on to the next one, Gib. So how do you negotiate? Again, I use this same bullseye negotiation wheel. Super simple, super easy. It flows nice and easily, and the vendors always are happy. And again, we do this perfect offer system where we go through and justify why our cost is. And like I said, I taught another 9 different ways in the inner circle. So there are at least 10 different ways you can structure the deal, and I explained how you can structure it and why you would structure it under different circumstances in different ways. And the thing that you're trying to understand is you almost act as a consultant. It's your niche knowledge of understanding how this works that gives you the ability to be able to complete these deals in this way that other people can't. And that's what the vendor is paying you for. And that's why they're selling you the property cheaper than they would normally if they understood and if, they had the money to buy to extend the deal. They normally think they've got no money. They haven't got the 30K, the 50K to extend. So then they're like, well, I've got to sell it for cash. Whereas that you don't need that cash to extend the deal. There's lots of other ways to structure this deal to make it work. Okay, carry on, Gib. Yeah, so here are some of the different ways that you can do it, and always consider the tax. That's the other thing I would say. But there are, buy it for cash, buy it with a lease option, buy it with mortgages, buy it with bridge, assignable exchange with delayed completion contracts, extend before and after. These are just some of the different ways. I haven't got time to explain all of them right now, but feel free in the Q&A to ask me some more. But really, the power of this strategy and all strategies is when you stack one strategy on top of another. So imagine you do so we're looking at doing this on one of the deals. What we're currently doing is we're buying a 1-bed flat and converting it to a 2-bed, but it's a 1-bed short lease property. And we're going to do a 1 to 2-bed conversion. So converting a 1-bed flat to a 2-bed flat. So we'll make 30 to 40K on doing the 1-bed to 2-bed conversion strategy, coupled with a short lease, which is another 30 or 40K of profit. And all of a sudden you're making 70, 80 grand on a property. And that's where you start really finding not just short leases, but any creative strategy works amazingly when you stack one on top of another and on top of another on top of another. And that's what I love. I love stacking the strategies together and creating that thing. I mean, that's why I did 50 different ways of structuring deals and stuff, is because this is one of the things, everybody has their hobby. My hobby is creating creative strategies. I love doing it. And, Guillaume will tell you, I'll sit there, not just within property, but even in business, I'll create different ways to do the same thing just so that everyone makes more money on it. It's my thing. It's what I love doing. Okay. So why now? Again, this Leasehold Reform Act, there's a niche. The yield boosts that you get from this is great. And again, you can rent those properties if they're the right kind of properties in the right areas to care companies, to social housing, to councils, etc. So they can be low impact or low maintenance type property deals. And like I said, no money down. I just done one last 3 weeks ago, whenever 12th of December is, I'm not sure. So, people say they're not possible, you can't do them. I did it, so I can't say any more than that. Okay. And we made a lot of money off of that deal, or there's 60K of property in that deal. or 60K of equity and profit in that deal. Okay, so one of the things I see, and I wanted to just sort of mention, is this thing called strategy jumping. What I see a lot, and when I used to teach, I taught thousands of people back in the day about all of this sort of stuff. And the mistake that people do is they go, oh, I'll do buy to let. No, I'm going to do some HMO. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And they jump from one strategy to another strategy. And they're not sure, should I do this? Should I do that? Should I, what was it that I should be doing? And the reason for that is the strategy they've chosen is not aligned to them and to the area that they're in. So you're trying to do buy to let in central London, it's never going to work. Or you're trying to do HMOs in some other areas, it's not going to work. What you have to do, you have to understand that you want one strategy that is focused and right, but it's the right strategy for you as a person in terms of your money, your personality type, the area that you're in, and you need to then give it that strategy enough time to work. So the people in the inner circle, with everyone there, what I've done is I spent like a 3-hour one-to-one, and we went through all of their stuff that they're doing at the moment, their personality, their understanding, where they want to go, where their goals are. And we use this strategy canvas, which is basically, if you look in the center there, is what does success actually mean for you? What's the most important thing that you want out of this? And then you set your goals according to that. So, how much cash flow do you want? How much long-term equity are you looking for? Are you trying to create a £2 million portfolio, a £10 million portfolio? Do you want 10 grand a month as your cash flow? And you create strategies that are going to align with those goals. There's no point in you trying to say, my goal is I want 10,000 a month, and you're doing buy-to-lets. How many buy-to-lets are you going to have to do to make that strategy work? Hundreds, right? It's not going to work. So you want to align the strategy with the right thing. And we use this canvas. And for each strategy, this canvas is built around each strategy. So this is your canvas. You use it. And it's basically about you, about your financing, about the marketing, about the team you're going to need to follow that strategy that you're going to do. And then we layer that on top of every strategy and see whether or not that strategy is going to work for you in your area or not. And you can just layer those canvases on top of one another, and it's a great way to identify the right strategy for you, or the right one or two strategies for you. Okay, so just to be clear, make sure that the strategy you're following aligns to you as a person and to what your goals and what success means for you. Okay, so just coming back to I've really spoken about 3 of my favorite strategies at the moment: supported living, assisted sales, and short leases. You can make and get financial freedom from any one of those strategies. And I know people who've just done one of those strategies and are, multimillionaires. So don't feel that you have to do all of them, but choose the one that you find is most fun and most easy for you to do and most aligns with you as a person. And as you get better and have spent some time, and when I do something new for 6 months, I choose one strategy, then I do the next one, then I do the next ones, because I want to get good at one strategy and I want to be, focused and clear on what I'm doing. And then I add on the next strategy and the next strategy. And as you get better, you can do more and more stuff, and you can stack strategies, and you can really push this to the limit and grow and scale really fast.